Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 281. Internalising criticism sucks. If you're anything like many of my clients, criticism can feel like a punch to the solar plexus that both knocks the wind out of us, leaving us breathless, whilst simultaneously feeding our inner critic. I've known the impact on me of a throwaway comment to be emotional, mental and physical, all a bit too much to take. And if you're someone who hyper-focuses on the critical comments you receive, this episode is a must listen, and I'll even suggest you save it to your favourites. Because in this episode, I'll be exploring why internalising criticism is actually unhealthy and how to deal with it better. Plus, I'm sharing a link to a special 3-minute calming resilience ritual that you can use as and when you need. Let's start by unpacking why internalising criticism can be such a problem for many of us. Because as introverts, we tend to reflect deeply, process everything thoroughly, and with a tendency to overthinking, this often hits us harder than it does for many extroverts. Criticism can feel like a personal attack, especially when it's apparent that little thought seems to have been given to how it might land. People say really naff things like, "Don't take this personally, but," and "Don't be so sensitive," and even, "I'm telling you this for your own good," when in reality, their intentions are self-oriented and anything but helpful. Many of you already know that I have a particular perspective, which is that criticism is at worst unfiltered opinion, or at best filtered through the lens of someone who doesn't understand what makes me tick, and therefore a million miles away from developmental feedback which might have been helpful. And yet the ignorant or out-of-date managers still use the term constructive criticism. Allow me to share a potted history of that term and why it's no longer relevant in business or society. Let me take you back to the post-war era when organisations typically practiced top-down authoritative leadership in those regimented workplaces designed more like factories. That's when the term constructive criticism began to appear in business and psychology literature. By the 1970s and 80s, that term had become part of the corporate training language, and I was there, so I remember it well. But my friends, that was 40 or 50 years ago. So if you're still being subjected to that language and practice, it's well past its sell-by date, and so are the people peddling it. I'll wager that they or their mini-me protégés are the ones using the naff statements like "don't take it personally" that I mentioned earlier, and in their narrow-minded way are also weaponising resilience. I explored that topic in episode 199 and continue to do so as its misapplication is becoming really toxic in organisations and some social relationships. There's one more point that I think is worth making, and that is the etymology of the word criticism as opposed to how it's become used now. The root of the word is from the Greek word kritikos, meaning to be able to judge or discern. It has the same root as criterion, crisis and critique, so in itself not problematic. In fact, to critique something is to provide a balanced and objective viewpoint. Then, in the 17th century, Criticism emerged rooted in intellectual analysis, not personal attack, and meaning the act of judging the merits and faults of something, especially in art or literature. So, still not an issue. The problem arose with what happened next, as over time, especially in casual or emotional usage, criticism has evolved to imply disapproval, fault-finding, or judgmental commentary, often unsolicited and delivered with a negative tone because it's shaped by bias or mood. Talking of how our mood or tone can shift, I notice I'm feeling a bit, bristly, rubbed up the wrong way, and I can feel my sass rising. That's because I'm getting to where the injustice is. You see, while the original meaning was about discerning quality or truth, today the word understandably can trigger defensiveness or shame, particularly for introverts who take words deeply to heart. No one particularly likes being criticised, and remember, we introverts think things through before articulating them, so we say what we mean. And we kind of expect others to do the same. Those living in the last century managers advising us to man up or grow a pair so they can dish out their thoughtless, unhelpful criticism need reminding of the origins of this word, because what they dole out, frankly, only serves to satisfy their ego and bolster their sense of superiority. It's not for your benefit. Calm yourself, Joe. So if you know you have a tendency to swallow criticism whole, believing every word, taking it on board lock, stock and barrel, and feeling despondent in the process, you have some work to do, my friend. Or should I say, we have some work to do. We as humans are wired for negativity because our evolutionary survival somewhat depends on it. Our brain's primary role is to keep us alive, so we naturally pay more attention to a negative experience. After all, ignoring the looming shape of a saber-toothed tiger would probably have resulted in death. As psychologist Rick Hansen said, our brains are like Velcro for negative thoughts in that they stick really well, but are like Teflon for positive thoughts, meaning they slide off without leaving a trace. More than that, introverts often revisit the Velcro-type sites in our mind to replay negative experiences on a never-ending loop, sometimes obsessively. This explains why we're so winded by criticism, and invariably that person's criticism or our negative experience morphs into self-criticism and internalized shame. So in simple terms, we need to be able to discern between constructive, in other words, actionable feedback, and unfiltered opinion. This involves constructing your very own criticism filter. Firstly, I like to remind myself of the huge difference between criticism and feedback. Let me walk you through a typical compare and contrast. The purpose of criticism is to vent, control, or satisfy their ego. The purpose of feedback is to reflect back the reality of a situation, which allows people to make better choices. The basis of criticism is personal preference, but for feedback, it's observed behaviour. The tone of criticism is judgmental, whereas the tone of feedback is supportive and maybe challenging. The usefulness of criticism is very limited and often damaging to confidence. The usefulness of feedback is specific and actionable, inspiring personal and professional development. The benefit of criticism only serves the giver, not the receiver. Feedback, on the other hand, benefits the receiver, the giver, and often the wider community. It has a true ripple effect. So in order to discern the difference between unfiltered criticism and genuinely actionable feedback, I find the following 3 basic questions to be a good starting point. Number 1, to what extent is what I've just been told true? Number 2, how useful is it to me? And number 3, what can I action? In asking these 3 questions of myself, I find the time I need to be able to pause and then respond rather than simply reacting. And of course, that aligns with our think, say, think communication process. And to counter the negativity bias, for balance, I need to connect with times when the opposite of their comment has been true, when I've demonstrated positive qualities. There's a great question I use in coaching for moments like this, and the question is, what else might be true? I also need to consider the source of and the intention behind the comment shared with me. Who are they to me? Because some people's opinion, frankly, holds no weight with me, and their intention might be masking their own unhealed wounds. When I know I'll be spending time with people like this, I step into my own protective bubble at the start of the day and leave it around me until my time with them has passed. I can always reapply it again later on if needed, and I often do. Because it's so effective, it's something I guide those on the frustrated to flourishing journey to use effectively. If you know you'd benefit from upping your protective bubble game, I'd say it's time to take a peek at the program, as it'll undoubtedly initiate the shift you need. You see, if we're not discerning and taking a moment to apply relevant energetic and emotional protection, we're opening ourselves up to reinforcing the faulty belief that we are not enough. In a desperate attempt to please others, we may act on feedback and comments that don't serve us, only the giver of them. This is a time to know and meet our own expectations, not those of someone who may not have our best interests at heart. And if you realise you've got caught in a defensive response and start over-explaining, know that you're not alone. I wrote a nudge, that's what I call my LinkedIn newsletter, on exactly that topic. It's called The Fine Line Between Over-Explaining and Giving Reasons, and you'll find the link in the show notes. Do give it a read, as it might help you break the habit of justifying yourself to people who are not open to your perspective. What we do need to do is to respond without absorbing. This is a time to be a mirror, not a sponge. Reflect back what you're hearing and hold it lightly until examined, rather than sucking it up without being discerning or checking for understanding. How might we do that? Pause, process, and then respond. This is how to reclaim your narrative, not through a lens of superiority or delusion, but through grounded authenticity. That means you can take real feedback seriously without taking it personally. Reframe the comments as someone else's data, not your identity. And in many cases, that someone is not skilled at delivering feedback, so the way you deal with their unfiltered opinion may actually help them to do better in the future. Remember to uphold your boundaries and engage your inner advocate in order to help manage the noise your inner critic might be making, because they'll undoubtedly be having a riot in your head. Develop your resilience, which, if we use Pemberton's 2015 definition, includes the capacity to remain flexible in our thoughts, feelings and behaviours when faced by life's disruption or extended periods of pressure, so that we emerge from difficulties stronger, wiser and more able. So it's not about bouncing back unchanged, ready to take on yet more. It's about reflecting on the way we are now changed. It took me a while to embody that, and I'm sure you remember my example of the feedback I was given at the end of a training course I was attending. And yes, I'm using that term feedback loosely now because it was most definitely the unfiltered, unhelpful opinion of the trainer. When I was told that I was a low responder who lacked confidence, just because I thought about my answer before contributing, it wasn't the truth. It was his opinion of me. It taught me a great lesson because now I know that many people don't understand our think, say, think communication process. I'll explain it as we start working together. That's how I manage expectations now and am able to flourish even in the face of criticism. I'm not avoiding the tough stuff, but I may be heading it off at the pass and handling it with more grace. My resilience has helped me to build a strong sense of who I am, regardless of what others think. It has also helped me to create distance between those who are just opinionated, enabling me to bring closer those who are serious about being there as I develop. Most of all, my enhanced resilience has enabled me to reduce the degree to which Gladys, my inner critic, is able to hijack my emotions, self-belief, or progress. And it has to be said that my resilience is not perfect armour for all situations, but it provides security when I am under attack. Criticism is noise, whereas feedback is a gift, and not everyone gets to sit at my table and offer me gifts. Fortunately, current day leadership and management training is more likely to focus on strengths-based feedback, affirming what is strong and exploring with open-minded curiosity how those strengths can be used to minimise or improve development areas. Again, I should know because I'm still there, and that's what I'm regularly doing with my corporate clients. I ask anyone who might be giving feedback to use the think filter before saying anything. So this is what think stands for. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring, so likely to be actioned? Is it necessary, and is it kind? So think is true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind. You can also use these filters when receiving feedback as a way to open the dialogue, because all good feedback is dialogue. Your questions can usefully stem from these 5 think points. In my example, knowing what I know now, I would have asked the trainer the following. Where is the evidence for your assertion that I lack confidence? How do you think your comments will help me be the best version of myself, as opposed to someone pretending to fit in with the extrovert ideal? And what strengths did you notice I demonstrated during your course? Once you accept that internalizing criticism really does suck, a whole host of other possibilities open up, all of which are healthier. Hindsight is a marvellous thing, isn't it? And the beauty of what I've shared with you here is that my hindsight can become your insight and your foresight. Remember to check the show notes for the link to the 3-minute resilience ritual. You'll thank me for it. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.